Okay, so I'm just going to record this because obviously not everybody's here today. So look, the other day we went through the heart. What I would like you to do just very quickly is, in this question booklet, go to question 4. Okay, question 4, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do question 4 without looking at your notes, okay? Go. Okay, let's have a look at question 1 then. So, Agnes, what did you put? Blood vessel A? This one up here? What did you say? Pulmonary artery. Yep, it's coming from down there and going up through there and up through there. B, Eve, what did you put for B? Aorta. And C, Lloyd, where is C? C is there. What's that called? Pulmonary vein. Match one of the letters with a chamber that pumps blood to the body organs. So it would be this one down here, which is that E? Yep. So E, which is actually the left ventricle, but you're asked for the letter. Blood vessel which carries blood to the lungs. Well, it's this one here, which is, that one there, which is A, coming up from the right ventricle. A valve which prevents blood flowing back into the left atrium. So if we look at this, I haven't really talked about the valves, but valves are flaps of tissue. If you were to look at a valve from above, some of them have like 3 flaps of tissue like that. And when the pressure above that gets so high, it forces the blood through there. So normally, if you were looking at them like a cross section, normally it looks like that when it's closed. Whenever the pressure there is so much higher, it gets forced like that and then eventually open up like that, and the blood can then pass through. So whenever the blood builds up in here, when this contracts, forces the blood into there, and then the atrium will relax, and then it's the ventricle's turn to contract, and that squeezes blood, and we've learned that it squeezes blood up through the aorta, but it also forces these valves closed at that point, because there's blood trying to sort of get out of the ventricle, and so some would try to get up there, but it can't, because the valve gets forced closed like that. Yeah, okay. So, a valve, well, that would be D, is that? It's very hard to read, isn't it? That's D. A chamber which pumps blood to the lungs is F, down here, okay? And then the next one, tendons which support the valves. Now, that wouldn't be on your exam or your assessment or anything like that, but you probably guessed it was G. Describe the relative oxygen content of the blood at points X and Y. So X is up here. So where does the blood come from? It's come from the lungs, so it's going to be oxygenated. So in X there's a higher oxygen content, whereas Y has a low oxygen content because it's come in through the vena cava, it's been all the way around your body, and so X has a much higher oxygen content than Y. Now, you can turn over, but have a look at, compare the diagram in front of you to the diagram from the previous, the one that I've got up on the screen there. What I'm trying to point out is that this is actually how it looks in real life. The pulmonary arteries and the aorta are sort of twisted around each other. Whereas in your diagram that you're looking at, So what I'm saying is, if you're asked to label a diagram of the heart, look closely to see whether they're straightened out or not. Don't just learn the one that goes to the left, the one that goes to the right. You know, look and see what chamber they're coming from. So, the part of the heart labelled X is Bernice? Right. Ventricle. Good. On the diagram, label the pulmonary vein. Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands if anybody left that out, but I would bank on there being at least somebody that didn't bother with it because there was no line. So pulmonary vein is going to be this blood vessel here. No, sorry, pulmonary vein, that blood vessel there. It's a vein, it's coming back to the heart, so it's taking blood back into the left ventricle. Sorry, left atrium. State the function of Y are valves, but you get the mark for saying what they do. They prevent blood flowing backwards. What do you think you need to add to get the second mark? Sophia, any ideas? No. Where do they stop the blood going back into? The atrium. Yeah. So basically, they prevent the blood flowing backwards from the ventricle into the atrium. Okay, a quick question about blood vessels. So, presence of valves, artery, no, vein, yes. Capillary, shout it out, everybody. Okay, wall thickness, well, you would say that is thick. And how thick is the capillary? It's only 1 cell thick. Blood pressure, high in the artery. I said it would be low by the time it reaches the vein. So question 4 then, cross-section of a heart, part A and part B. Let's just put a few labels on here. So remember, it's as if there's a heart plunked down in front of you, or maybe if you want to think of it, you're looking at somebody. That's going to be their left side. That's going to be their right side. So obviously A, what did you put for that, Lois? Sorry? Question 4? Yes, all right, we're on question 4.
The left ventricle.
Left ventricle, good. And then why, so what's B? B is obviously the right ventricle. You're not asked for that, but it's saying why is this wall thicker than that? So if you look at the muscle, it's much thicker there than it is on the other side. So Lily, what did you say?
It's receiving and pushing out a stronger blood flow and more blood.
A wee bit louder, sorry.
It's receiving and pushing out a stronger blood flow and more blood.
Okay, why? It's not so much more blood, but it's a stronger blood flow. Why does it have to produce a stronger blood flow?
Because it's pushing it all around the body.
Yeah, so you need to include that. So you can say it's pumping blood around the body, so that's the main thing. And then add arrows to show the flow of blood through the heart. Look, for goodness sake, people, quite often when I'm marking homeworks or tests, a question like that, now I know I've said this probably 100 times, a question like that doesn't have a line for you to write on. And 9 times out of 10, someone will just leave it out because they're reading too quickly. So add arrows to the diagram, show the blood flow through the heart. So it doesn't matter where you start, but it's coming in this side and it's going up through there. It's coming in through there. It's going up through there. blood vessels associated with the heart that carry deoxygenated blood. So it's blood vessel going to the lungs is the pulmonary artery. And the vena cava is the other one. That's the vein that's been all the way around the body, or that's carrying blood that's been all the way around the body. So that's the vena cava. Doesn't matter what order you put those in. Okay, we've done questions. Now, we're just going to take a pause the questions at the moment, and we're going to go back to thinking about the structures of things. So we've looked at the heart and the blood vessels associated with the heart. Let's think about the blood vessels. So we've got 3 blood vessels there. Just label them A, B, and C. Which one is the capillary? Shout it out. B. Okay. Which one do you think is the artery? Yeah. And C is the vein. What do we call this bit here? This is the gap in the middle. Yeah, that's the lumen. And that's basically the space that the blood flows through. This is a muscular wall. And I suppose if I was drawing this a bit more accurately, I would have drawn it more like that. So if we look at the muscular wall, and if we compare the artery and the vein, artery has a thicker muscular wall. If you're asked to compare the blood vessels, you can't just say it has a muscular wall. You need to say that the artery has a more muscular wall, or the artery has thicker muscle than the vein. You need to say which one is thicker or bigger or smaller or whatever. So the artery has a thicker muscular wall. What about the lumen in those two, the artery and the vein?
The vein has a bigger lumen.
Sorry, which one's bigger?
The vein.
Vein. So the vein, whoops. Has a larger lumen. All right. Quite often the vein doesn't look round. You would imagine that a vein should look like that, okay? There's the wall, there's the lumen in the middle. Quite often it doesn't. If you were to actually cut through someone and look at their arteries and their veins haven't retained that round shape because they haven't got very much muscle there and elastic tissue. Okay. The artery needs the muscle and elastic tissue in there to maintain high blood pressure. And also, your blood is being pumped out in pulses. And so you'll get a big burst of blood, and then the artery needs to recoil to spring back to its original shape. So that's why it has all the muscle there and lots of elastic fibres. Veins don't. Veins are carrying blood back to your heart. So the blood has come from the heart. That's where it's at the highest pressure when it comes through the aorta, the main artery in your body. And then the blood, as it travels further away from your heart, it's travelling under a little bit less pressure and a little bit more slowly. And when it gets into the tiny capillaries, there's so much friction there because all the blood cells are going to be in contact with the walls of capillaries. Capillaries are only wide enough to let one blood cell through at a time. And so there's a lot more friction and it slows the blood down. So by the time the blood makes it out of the capillaries and into the veins, it's just trickling. And so it doesn't need to have that muscular wall. There's no pressure, there's no pulses. The blood is just trickling through the veins. What do veins have to prevent the blood flowing backwards? Sorry? Valves. Okay, so that's the another difference there. So very quickly, we'll do a bit more teaching and then you can do some more questions. All right. There is a little question there which is 5 part B. We'll go to that now, all right? If you go to 5, we'll do 5 together now actually. And we've done question 5. So we'll just put the questions away for now. So it's saying this diagram shows an external view of the heart. You can't see the chambers inside there because we're looking at the outside. Blood vessels A and B. This is quite tricky. Which one do you think A is? Anybody want to guess? Beth, what do you think? Aorta. So it's actually originating down there. So that's the aorta. And B is coming from the body, going back to the heart. So, Alex, what does that make it? Yeah. Okay, the next part of the question refers to these blood vessels here, the coronary arteries. And as you know, they supply the heart with its own blood supply. It's saying we've got a cross section through a normal coronary artery, and this is the lumen. That's where all the space is for the blood to flow, whereas it's much smaller here in the one belonging to someone that's had a heart attack. So you can see that person has built up a lot of fatty tissue there. How would that cause a heart attack? So, what's the first thing you notice when you look there? Wee bit louder? Yeah, so you'd say the fatty deposit reduces the size of the lumen. Therefore, the heart muscle gets less glucose and oxygen. And if the lumen gets blocked, the heart won't get any oxygen and glucose, it will stop respiring, and that's a heart attack. So if it gets blocked, the heart won't get any glucose or oxygen, it won't respire, and therefore the heart muscle dies. Now, the next question says, give 2 changes in lifestyle which could reduce the chance of a further heart attack. Now, it's not a great question because they don't tell you anything about this person's lifestyle. So you then have to think, okay, it doesn't matter whether the person is doing no exercise or a little exercise. If you simply say, do more exercise or exercise more regularly, that covers everything. So something like, increase the amount of exercise. Eat less fatty foods. You could have reduced stress. And they would give you a mark if you said stop smoking. Even though you don't know whether the person's smoking or not, they'll still give you a mark for realising that smoking is a problem. So look, what I'm going to do, that you have got questions 1, 2 and 3. It'll probably not even take you 10 minutes, all right? So if you work through those, try them without using your notes, all right? Now, we're going to move on and think about puberty, and we're going to think about the things that happen around puberty, production of sperm and so on. So, in terms of puberty, they're not going to ask you what age does it happen. It happens around 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It depends on the person. It's not always the same age. As I said, it differs from person to person. So what we're thinking here of is what happens to the body around puberty. And basically, the body is preparing for reproduction. And that's whenever the person's body becomes capable of reproduction. So in the case of males and females, we've got some differences. So in the case of males, the key thing is that sperm are produced and that eggs or ova are produced. And so that's obviously in the testes, and this happens in the ovaries. So they are the gametes. So that is the main, we talk about sort of sexual characteristics. So in terms of reproduction, producing the egg or the sperm. Now, there are a lot of other secondary sexual characteristics that happen alongside that, because there are hormones produced in the body that bring about production of sperm in the testes and production of ova or eggs in the ovaries. So what's the male sex hormone? Anybody shout it out? Testosterone. And the female one is estrogen. So testosterone is produced by the testes, estrogen is produced by the ovaries. That is a sort of generalization, because if you look into drugs testing and things like that in sports, there's been a lot of talk about that recently. But quite a few years ago, there was a woman who was winning a lot of sort of middle distance, long distance races. I just can't remember her name. Castra something or other. And whenever they tested her, because she was phenomenal, she was really, really good. And people said, oh, I think she's a bit odd looking. I think there's something up there. And when they tested her, they did a blood test to see if she had any performance enhancing drugs. They found that her testosterone level was high. Now, we've just said there, testosterone is produced in the testes. That's not, it is true, but females also have a low level of testosterone in their bodies, okay? And so her level of testosterone was abnormally high, and then it turned out it was because she had a genetic condition which made her produce the testosterone. So just so that in case you're reading and you think, oh, but I learned that only men have testosterone, that's not completely true. But in terms of puberty, testosterone is the male hormone, and it is responsible for production of sperm in the testes. Now, obviously, she was female, didn't have testes and so on, but she had more testosterone. Testosterone increases the muscle mass, the amount of muscle in the body. So she was more muscular than the average female athlete because she had more testosterone. In the 1980s, Russia was still communist, and everything was controlled by the state. And if you were a child at primary school and you were particularly good at sport, they might have sort of gone to your parents and said, look, we think your son or daughter is going to be really, really good, so we want to train them. And they almost took over your life. And if you were an athlete in the 1980s in the USSR, the Russian Republic, basically, they were injecting their athletes with performance-enhancing drugs. They were injecting the women shot putters and javelin throwers and all those kind of events. They were injecting them with testosterone. And so if I showed you a picture of a female Russian shot putter in 1980, you probably would have thought she was a man, because she looked so muscular and actually had deep voices and all that, because they were being injected with testosterone. So increase muscle, voice deepens, hair grows, and it's body hair. So whereas in females we don't have increased muscle, we don't have voice deepening, we have hair, but it's just really in the armpits and the pubic region. Females, breasts develop, and the hips widen, and those are hips widen to make childbirth more feasible. Breasts develop, obviously for production of milk for whenever she wants to breastfeed her baby. So those are the some of the secondary sexual characteristics. Your textbook says sexual awareness, and that's both boys and girls. You become sexually aware, so you're aware of, maybe attracted. And what else have we got? Oh yeah, sexual organs develop or increase in size. I suppose that sort of goes with the breasts there, okay? So there are differences. You need to know what is what. The other thing, as we said, sperm are produced, eggs are produced. So in the female, that means menstruation. So if we look at this cycle, you need to be aware of the fact that on average it's a 28-day cycle, and that the first about 5 days is when the girl has a period, or the proper term is menstruation. Okay, so that's when the wall of the uterus starts to break down, passes out of the body along with blood. All right, so that happens on average 5 days. The whole purpose of this is to prepare the uterus for receiving an egg. So if that's a very dodgy diagram of the female reproductive organ, there's the ovary there. So if an egg was released, an egg would be released about day 14, about day 15. Okay, so usually day 14. If an egg is released on day 14, it will start to travel down here. If she has sex, sperm would be deposited in here and in the vagina, swim up through the cervix into the uterus. And if fertilization is going to happen, it's going to happen here, somewhere along the oviduct. So obviously the next month it might be on this side here. Fertilization would happen there. And it'll take several days for that zygote to move down into the uterus, and then it should embed itself, implant itself in the wall of the uterus. So the wall by then should be nice and thick and soft. And so all this extra tissue builds up. So from day 6, the wall of the uterus starts to thicken in preparation for receiving the little ball of cells, the little zygote, okay? Well, it's now really an embryo. So ideally, it would implant itself in the soft wall. So that tissue builds up over those days, And so by the time day 14 comes, it's nice and thick. And if she has sex and if fertilization occurs, hopefully then the little ball of cells will implant itself in the wall of the uterus. And that cycle will actually stop. And her body knows that because there are chemicals that are produced that stop her cycle. And so the wall doesn't break down. And obviously then the embryo starts to grow and so on. But the majority of times there's no fertilization. So what happens? We said day 14, day 15, day 16, just in case the wall is nice and thick. But if there's no implantation, then by the time we come to day 28, the whole cycle starts again and the wall breaks down and passes out of the body. So the key thing is when menstruation occurs, usually days 1 to 5, then the wall thickens, ovulation, day 14 usually, and it continues to thicken, all right? And then it breaks down at the start of the new cycle, all right? Controlled by estrogen, which is the female hormone. Another important hormone is progesterone. Look, I think it's 1 minute before the bell, so we'll let you get tidied up. In terms of homework, I want you to revise that bit, all right? Okay, so revise puberty, menstruation, menstrual cycle, all right?